Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today we are continuing with another Top 2024 list, this time the best 10 prototypes I played in 2024. As usual for a list like this, for a Board Game Co. list, we will have more than 10 games, and I mean that in more ways than one, but let's start off with the first way, which are the games I will not be covering today, because there's one specific game I'm not covering, and then a category of games that I'm not covering that would be eligible for this list, and so I want to explain why they're not in this list before I go into our list of 10 plus games. The first is Ironwood from Mind Clash Games. Ironwood is an excellent prototype that I played in 2024 that I really recommend and enjoy, but it also already delivered in 2024. It was more of a pre-order, so the prototype I got, I don't know if it fully counts as it was a prototype, I guess, but it's like a pre-order, so like, I don't know. You can take it as you want, but what you should know is Ironwood was good enough that it would be on my list of top 10 prototypes. The only reason it's not is because I'm not sure if it fully counts as a prototype, as it already delivered and was more of a pre-order campaign than a full regular length crowdfunding campaign. The second is more of a category of games, and I don't know if this encompasses all of them, but the two specifically that I have in mind are Kemet, Kemet the Gods, the Gods expansion, I don't remember what it's called, Fury of the Gods, something of the Gods, the Kemet campaign, as well as Deliverance. Both of those were expansions to already existing games, and I'm not including expansions in this list. Both those would otherwise be eligible. They're both great games, I really like them. Kemet is great, added more content to the game, Deliverance is great. There might be others I don't remember offhand, but I'm not including expansions in this list. What I am including is re-implementations. So if there are re-implementations, meaning if it's a new version of an already existing game, that I am including in this list. And with that, let's go through our 10 games. So these, by the way, I guess the way you could look at this is these are games you could either be excited about if you already backed them, you could possibly late back them if they're relevant to do so, or you could simply bypass them as games that are not relevant for you, because not all lists have to turn into a purchase on your end. But with that said, let's start with number 10. Number 10 is Ministry of Lost Things from Post Curious. This is a small box escape room game. I generally appreciate the escape room games that Post Curious does, more so than other companies. I feel like more love and attention and care go into their products, and I don't mean this as a dismissiveness to other products. I think the Unlock series is incredibly accessible, both in terms of price point, consistency of play. I enjoy them very much, as well as other series too, but I do think there's a level of premiumness that goes into Post Curious's offerings, from anything from the Morrison Game Factory to the Emerald Flame to Ministry of Lost Things. Ministry of Lost Things, or MOLT for short, is a starting basis to, this is episode 1, they're going to have more of them, but you're kind of searching, you're responsible for things that go lost in the universe, and you're trying to help reunite a thing that was not supposed to have been lost with its past owner. And to that end, you'll go on this journey and uncover both the story of what's happening as well as solving problems along the way. I thought it was an excellent escape room experience, gives it to you across 4, maybe 5 sessions if I recall correctly, and overall was yet another example of an excellent escape room game from Post Curious. Number 9 is Western Legend Stories. This one is a little lower down, partially because I only got to play the first scenario, and I really do need to play more of it in order to see if it's really a game that I like, or if I just like the premise and promise that the game introduced me to, but I didn't get to see enough of it to know if the game is going to deliver. Many a legacy game that I've played, almost every legacy game I play, starts off strong, and then from there, some of them remain strong, and others I get a little less intrigued by as they go on. This is not a legacy game, it's more of a campaign game. It felt like a legacy game, but you're not actually destroying things, so you can reset it, but it basically takes place in the Western Legends universe and gives you a stories way to go through the universe across, I believe it was 7 missions if I recall correctly. I only got access to really 1 of those 7 missions, but I did really enjoy the kind of adventure-y nature and of course the unlocking element that the game is going to bring to the table. So I thought it captured parts of Western Legends that Western Legends does well, and then it gave you more of an unlocking story-based aspect, and so it turns the game from one that I'm obsessed with winning and more into one where I'm obsessed is a strong word, and turns it into more one where I'm obsessed about uncovering and discovering more. I love it when a game gives me opportunities to interact with things, and there's a lot of pressure to interact, because very often you couldn't do everything. As you interact with different things, other things would disappear and go away, so you're like, do I go to the forest? Do I talk to that cabin? Do I go to the trading post? What is it that I should do? Because not all opportunities are going to be available, and some will leave as the game progresses. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to playing it more. Coming in number 8 is Vestige from Orange Nebula. This one is lower down the list because there's a degree of less excitement around this because it definitely was more of a re-implementation of Vindication. There are definitely differences between the two games to be very, very clear. There are reasons to own one or the other. There are even reasons to own both, although I do think that's a smaller subset of people, especially if you're trying to be mindful of where your gaming dollars go. But Vestige from Orange Nebula is a re-implementation of my number 1 game of all time as of last year. This year it actually got replaced by Castle of Burgundy, if you want to go check that out video. Spoilers, sorry about that. But anyways, Vestige did a lot of things that does the things that Vindication already does well for me. So that general puzzle of trying to optimize with a set of locations that are going to slowly uncover and then figuring out your own challenge as you gather various cards, that puzzle that Vindication offers is very much present in Vestige. It also added some new things, such as a solo automa if you want to play against these Nemesis characters, either cooperatively, competitively, or as a pure solo game, as well as these various goals you unlock as you hit certain point scoring markers that act kind of as missions that you have to go on. It replaces the secret missions from Vindication with these goals in Vestige, and it also adds a kind of pick up and deliver aspect to the game, where you can't just get things the way you would in Vindication, rather you have to kind of achieve certain goals before doing so in Vestige. Overall, I really enjoyed Vestige and definitely recommend checking it out, whether you're a fan of Vindication or not. Coming in at number 7, we have Core of Discovery from Jay Cormier from Off the Page Games. Core of Discovery, which I believe is going to be delivering shortly. They actually had copies available at PAX Unplugged for sale, so there's some people already have their hands in it. Was an excellent cooperative deduction game. I really enjoy deduction games, and I do find that cooperatively, a cooperative deduction game almost feels even better to me than regular deduction, which is it's an interesting challenge. But the way I'd put it is Tiwanuku, one of my favorite deduction games, if not my favorite, is one that I find that my biggest compliment I can pay to it is even when I'm playing it competitively, there ends up being almost a cooperative spirit to the gameplay, which just makes the game better. It gives that element of like, oh, what about this, and if you combine that, oh, and this can't be here because that's there, and if you like follow this trail of different possibilities, you get to the truth. So I love deduction games in general as to what they can do, and Core of Discovery also gave adventures and scenarios that further elongate how much gameplay you can get out of the game system. Really looking forward to it. If you've backed it, I think you'll be very happy with it. Well, I can't guarantee you'll be happy with it. I don't know what your gaming tastes are, but I hope you're happy with it as I am. Coming in number 6, we have Brink from Ivy Studios. Brink was an excellent worker placement game that really challenged you to think through the consequences of everything you place on several counts. From the actions you want, from the placements on the board, to the various area control elements you get and the scoring you're going to get as you go on different locations. There is so much to consider on every single placement in Brink. The game takes place across 3 rounds, and in each round you're placing 3 ships, so you're only really placing 9 total actions in the game. But the amount of gameplay Brink manages to take out of those actions, combined with the interactivity of the game in terms of being able to offer things for other players and have them interact with you and with your goods as you get them, that really gave a lot of gameplay to Brink. I really enjoyed it. I thought it did an excellent job as far as giving you interactivity between players and a lot of thought that goes into every single action you take out of the experience. I love Brink, and I'm looking forward to tabling it again when the final game shows up. Coming in at number 5, we have The Dead Keep. The Dead Keep is an interesting one, and I wondered where to place this. Actually, if you look at my ratings on these games, because my ratings are interesting here, because my rating for Brink was actually higher than my rating for The Dead Keep, but Dead Keep I actually almost put at my number 2 on this list, but I slowly bumped it down because Dead Keep falls into a weird place for me. This is the nature of prototype coverage, where my rating on Brink is higher than Dead Keep, and that might stay true long term. I don't know, like this might be flipped in the future. The tricky part is, The Dead Keep was an excellent, excellent game that to me felt like a good combination of Zombicide, Massive Darkness, and Cthulhu Death May Die, kind of pulling elements from each of those systems together, and specifically in Zombicide Black Plague, I'd say specifically that one. So Zombicide Black Plague, Massive Darkness, and Cthulhu Death May Die having small elements from each to give you a system that definitely felt like a Zombicide game, but also felt like it branched out from what a Zombicide game typically does. So it'll feel familiar and yet different. You could call it a re-implementation, not entirely sure, but I also think it's its own thing. I love The Dead Keep. I thought it was an excellent, excellent game in that universe, and I'm generally a fan of this universe, but that comes with pros and cons, because it means that whenever a new Zombicide game comes out, I'm equally torn between, is this another great, excellent one that I love, or is it one that's just good and I'm going to stick with the ones I already have? And over time, like right now, I own Zombicide Black Plague, I own Marvel Zombies, and the other Zombicide games, whether I like them or didn't like them, they've gone because they always are victim to the best of the best. So it's both a blessing and a curse to release a game that targets those game mechanics. Now again, the Deadkeep is definitely Zombicide game adjacent. It is not fully a Zombicide experience, definitely felt different enough, but also felt similar at the same time. The tricky part for this one for me as to why it's both higher than Brink, even though I rated Brink higher, but also lower than the number 2 spot I originally put this at, is the tricky part is the prototype. I felt the boss mechanic at the end, which borrows a little bit from Cthulhu Death May Die, I felt it wasn't nearly as good as Cthulhu Death May Die. In fact, I would argue that the boss mechanic had a lot of promise to the way it's structured, but then I would argue that for me it felt like the promise was there and then it felt a little flat, which takes a great game and gives you a slightly messy, not as satisfying ultimate ending to the experience, which definitely can tarnish it. It can tarnish it to the point that as much as I love the Deadkeep, I don't know whether it's going to be like amongst my best games when it finally shows up, or a game that I let go because that ending kind of leaves it a bit hanging. So it's one that I really do hope they tweak and put work into the ending to make it a bit better, a bit more streamlined. You can check out my review for more information as to the whole why I felt this way and elements of it. But it does put it into a weird spot where if they fix and improve that ending, if they make it more Death May Die adjacent, or alternatively its own thing, but just different than the way it currently is, this could absolutely be one of the higher games on this list and one of my best games when it shows up. Alternatively, if they don't, it'll be a game that came so close and yet, like Icarus, fell a drop too short of the sun itself. And so that's my number 5, The Deadkeep. My number 4 is Avalon, the Riven Vale, a area control game that oh my gosh, I thought this was an excellent game that I had people asking me whether I'd play Blood Rage or Avalon. And my answer is complicated. My answer is Avalon right now, but I also have a ton of plays of Blood Rage and a handful of plays of Avalon, so the freshness is still there. That said, there are many area control games which don't get that answer regardless of the freshness. Avalon, the Riven Vale from Shadowborn Games was an excellent area control game that I thought did a great job of giving you, again, a lot of weight to every decision you make from the cards you're going to keep and utilize for your actions across these 3 rounds of play, or even 2 rounds. One of the strengths of Avalon is you can feel like you played a full game after even one of the 3 rounds of play. 2 rounds is for sure a full game, and 3 rounds is the full game. And all of that, a full 3-round game will come in at 3, maybe 4 hours if you're taking your time and playing at a full 4 players. So it gives you a ton of area control gaming into a small area, a relatively small area of time. It also played well at 2 players. This is an area control game I have played it at 2 and higher, and I thought 2 did a great job as well, which I don't always believe that when it comes to area control games. I think a lot of times you need those extra players at the table. So Avalon, the Riven Vale, excellent area control experience, one that I highly recommend, especially if you like area control games, or if you even just pulled in by the theme. That's my number 4. My number 3 is God of War. God of War, which I don't think I ever put out a review on. I may have done a first impressions. I don't remember fully. I may have just shied away from it at the time as well, because I remember there were a lot of people who are already not happy with that campaign, so I may not have bothered. I don't recall. Now I want to go back and look whether I did a review or opinion and all that. And I didn't have a full actual game. I only had TTS. This is a game I've only played on Tabletop Simulator. I played God of War from Simon, but I thought it was great. I really enjoy what the game does, although again, this is the tricky part because it is the kind of gaming experience where it is inherently possible that it loses out to better games. I love Cthulhu Death May Die, and with 4 seasons under my belt, not under my belt, but with 4 seasons that I own, and more seasons coming, who's to say where that game ends up and whether it's a game that, with so much Death May Die content, who's to say whether God of War is a game that I give enough time to? And the reason I'm comparing them is they definitely had elements of similarity. Now again, like the Deadkeep, elements that were different as well. It felt like it took what worked well about Cthulhu Death May Die, adapted to the God of War universe, and then it did enough things that were different that make it also stand out. But as a pure experience, I definitely prefer Death May Die, but I do think that God of War did a lot of things that were incredibly satisfying, particularly the element of teamwork between the 2 main players. If you're playing as Kratos and Atreides, is that his name? I don't remember. It's Kratos and his son. If you're playing as those characters, you do want to work together to kill the various enemies, because anytime you have shared damage on an enemy, you get a boon from that, and so it forces you to examine these games in a different way than you typically examine your typical dungeon crawler or CMON big box whatever. Usually it's just focused on get the job done at whatever cost. The fact that there's an entire gameplay focused around this sense of teamwork, and the fact that it did come through in the decisions I was making, made God of War stand out as a game that stands on its own and gives me enough reasons to experience and play it compared to other games in the genre. I also felt it was definitely challenging enough. There were games I lost, there were games I won. I had a lot of fun with the God of War prototype, and it's one that I am, with again TTS exceptions and all that, I only played on Tabletop Simulator, but it's one that I really enjoyed. I'm looking forward to it, and I think as well the fact that it does so well at 2 players, even though they have those higher player modes, or the fact that it does so well solo. I've played it both solo and 2 players. I haven't played it at higher player counts, and I do think that I think that I prefer playing a two players two-handed than true solo, although both were certainly enjoyable, but overall, really appreciated God of War and definitely one worth checking out. My number 2 is going to be a grouping of games, because this is a whole bunch. I know Simon's getting a lot of love on this list, but ultimately they did deliver a lot of the better prototypes that I played, at least for me. Although again, I am a fan of that style of game, so take that as you will. But my number 2 is going to be a grouping of games. It's going to be DCeased, DC United, and Cthulhu Death May Die Forbidden Reaches. Because as much as I'm willing to include re-implementations of games that already exist, DCeased is basically Marvel Zombies with a new theme. DC United is Marvel United with a new theme. Cthulhu Death May Die Forbidden Reaches is arguably the most innovative of the game, because at least it does new things within the Cthulhu Death May Die universe, but it still is a more of the same within these universes. And so I'm willing to give this the number 2 spot, and again, there are 3 game systems that I love. I love Marvel Zombies, I love Marvel United, I love Cthulhu Death May Die. So these definitely do deserve the number 2 spot, but they're getting a grouped number 2 spot. They do not get their own listings for putting out just re-themed versions and expansions to already existing games. Again, Cthulhu Death May Die Forbidden Reaches, technically not an expansion because it stands on its own. You can get it on its own as a core box, which is why it's not an expansion, but they still will share this grouping. That said, I have played all 3 of these. They're not just saying this because I'm excited. I've played DCeased, and I thought it was brutally punishing and hard, and I really enjoyed it. And I know people are upset that you can't play as the zombies, but frankly, I prefer playing as the heroes. I prefer the hero mode of Marvel Zombies, so I'm happy with that in DCeased. I had a lot of fun with the prototype. I played like 4 times, maybe 3 times, I don't remember. I think I have 3 filmed gameplays, and then 1 unfilmed gameplay, if I'm not mistaken. But overall, I really enjoyed DCeased. I'm incredibly looking forward to it. It was punishing, it was hard, and I had a lot of fun going through that. You can check out the gameplays on the channel. There's also DC United, which again, gave me more Marvel United within the DC system, which I'm not saying no to. I don't need it, I don't care about it. That's not true, I do care about it. I don't need it, but I do like the Marvel United system, and again, I had fun with DC United, so I'm not saying no to, granted, something I totally don't need. And then Cthulhu May Die Forbidden Reaches. As much as I don't currently need more Cthulhu content because I just got Season 3 and 4, I am excited about the new shared skills that the investigators are going to have, as well as the other elements brought to the table. So while I don't need everything in it, I love that game. It's one of my favorite games, and I'm not saying no to more content. So these collectively get my number 2 spot. And then lastly, my number 1 spot, which those of you who've been watching enough on the channel probably figured out by now, is Lands of Evershade from Awakened Realms. Lands of Evershade is one that was not on my radar. When they announced their lineup for 2024, I was far more excited about, what's the name of the game? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. What's the name? Grim Coven. Grim Coven. I was far more excited about Grim Coven over Lands of Evershade, just from the visual aspect, and Lands of Evershade felt like another campaign game, and as much as those have an appeal to me, I'm also burnt out by trying to table these games and only being able to table 1 out of every 10 that I own. I do play campaign games, I enjoy campaign games, but I have so many of them that I can't give them all the attention I want to. And so with Lands of Evershade, I just kind of signed it off as another Tainted Grail game that I'm sure I'd play it, but I wasn't that excited for it. And so when I did play it and enjoyed it as much as I did, I was shocked by how much I enjoyed it, and I was also pleasantly surprised by the fact that it gave you a campaign game that was shorter in its duration. This is not a campaign game that asks you to spend hundreds of hours in it. It gives you these campaigns that could be 15 to 30 hours at a time of campaign, possibly, I'd say probably closer to the 15 hours per campaign that you go through, but you can also go through 3 arcs. So even going through a full 3 arcs would be 45 hours, but you don't even have to. You could do arc 1 and come back a year later and start a new arc continuing with your characters and kind of more of a D&D approach. But I really like the gameplay. I like the way the keywords activate with the system. I like the combat. I liked Lands of Evershade a lot. I was also pleasantly surprised to see that a lot of other people felt the same way. There are numerous people, both content creators and people who got to demo the game at Essen as well, who are saying this is one of the best Awakened Realm games they've played, if not the best. And for me, it is the best Awakened Realm game I have played so far, always excluding the caveat of, I'm sure they hate it when I do this, but every time I say this, I always say, excluding the Castle of Burgundy, which I don't think of as an Awakened Realms game. And I'm sure that if they ever watch these videos, they're like, Alex, you don't need to constantly caveat that. That's unnecessary. Just say you like Lands of Evershade. But I feel like words matter, and I don't want to be caught in like a weird thing. So either way, Lands of Evershade is the best Awakened Realms game I've played. Caveat and asterisk and all that. Anyways, these are the best 10 prototypes I have played in 2024. There are some great games amongst these games. Like, I was going through my list to put this together, and I was trying to think through, like, was I even excited about more than, like, 3 or 4 games? And I forgot about half these games. And so, yes, the answer is yes, I'm excited about a lot of these. Like, I remember, like, Brink, and I remember Brink, I remembered Avalon, I remembered Lands of Evershade offhand because those three were more recent towards the end of the year. But then the rest, I was like, what else did I even play this year? And as I went through the various reviews and previews that I've put out, I was like, you know what? I actually played a pleasantly surprising amount of prototypes. Granted, DCeased, DC United, and Death May Die are all just more of the same, and Vestige for that matter, are more of the same from games I already like, but nonetheless, that still leaves a good chunk of games that I'm very, very excited about that aren't those, not to mention I am excited about those, so those count as well. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Let me know in the comments down below what game did you back last year that you are most anticipating and why. And until next time, and as always, I hope you have a good one.